Hi everyone, welcome to my latest video. This video is showing you a spreadsheet that I created last week. A spreadsheet is for people who want a grid solar system or who are interested in how it works. This information is from everything I've learned over the past few weeks about doing solar, and it's only now after learning it all that I can actually create a spreadsheet that automates calculations so that other people can benefit from it, and maybe this can help them to understand how things work. So the spreadsheet in general just helps people to calculate what sort of capacities and other things about what they're going to need in order to create an off-grid solar panel system, like battery size, how many panels they're going to need, and one or two other things that I'll go into later. So I'm going to put a link on the video so that you can download this spreadsheet and start playing about with it. So the idea of this video is that I'm going to show you how to use it, and what the spreadsheet can do, and why it's useful really. So the idea is that the spreadsheet will just give you a guide, a bit of guidance on what you're going to need to be able to create something, but don't rely on it completely. But yeah, it's just as a guide. So this is how to use it. On the first page, it's called loading. This is for anything that you need to power from your solar panel system. So I'm just going to start putting a couple of things in. So PC, 180 watts. I'll use it for 2 hours. Microwave, 1250. I'll use this for 5 minutes. Oh, this little thing here calculates minutes to hours in decimal. Hours and minutes are in base 60, whereas this is in base 10. So yeah, so just put in the amount of minutes there and it converts it to decimal for you. So 5 minutes is 0.08 hours in base 10. So that's another device. Microwave, phone, 5 watts. It'll be charging for 4 hours probably. Any other things? Laptop, 40 watts. I'm going to use that for 4 hours as well. Each device in the EU, by the way, should have an energy rating on it. I've noticed that sometimes it doesn't actually have it in watts, but it can have it in amperage and voltage. So if you don't have a watt rating, you only have amperage and voltage, then multiply voltage by amperage. So for example, 220 volts multiplied by 2 amps is 440 watts. Or the phone, for example, 5 volts, which is USB, multiplied by 1 amp, which is a typical amount of current to charge a phone. 5 multiplied by 1 is 5 watts. Anyway, so we've got our devices in here that I've put in the loading. So I'll show you the other items on this sheet. So domestic voltage, you have to put your domestic voltage in there. By the way, this is only really tested for UK. I don't know about other countries, and I haven't tested this spreadsheet for anything else other than 220 to 240. So put your voltage in there, 220 to 240 for the UK, and it will influence some of the calculations over here on various places. So it's worked out the total daily consumption for everything we've added in here is 640 watt hours. Energy required after the charge controller loss is 711 watt hours. Energy required after the battery loss is this. Energy required after the inverter loss is this. So after all the losses, it calculates that you need to actually generate 930 watt hours rather than 640 watt hours. So that's that. So you need to generate that 930 watt hours. which is important. It's quite an important thing to know. So you're going to need an inverter to be able to get power out of the batteries, and this system is recommending that you buy an inverter with a rating of 1,500 watts really. Again, it's just an idea, it's not anything final, it's not really based on anything. Those two values will fill in later. The inverter efficiency is at 90%. In general, it will be 90%. If you buy a really good inverter, it might be higher. Or if you buy a rubbish inverter, it'll be lower. The actual inverter rating you put in here, so if you don't want to buy a 1500 watt inverter, you can buy a 1000 watt inverter or whatever, because maybe you won't be using a microwave, because you can see here that all the other appliances are much less than 1250, so you can put in your own inverter right in there, and that's that. So you need, this is saying that you need 930 watt hours, so you need your panels to generate that 930 watt hours. So we'll go on to the next page, which is panel banks. In here, each row represents panels that are in parallel. So if you have them in series, you add them all together. So let's say, delete that. So you need to generate 930 watt hours. So if you bought two 236 volt panels and join them in series, 72 volts, they're probably about 7 amps. So that would generate 500 watts. Also, these panels are usually sold in watts, so you'd have to find out the voltage and amperage, which should be on the sticker behind the solar panel anyway, and you can enter that there. This is the total, or the total amounts if you've got things in parallel. This is the daily sunlight hours. In winter in the UK it's usually about 2, and in the summer it can be 6. So this is generally how much energy you produce in winter, and if you put in 6, that's generally how much energy you produce in summer. But I keep it at 2 for winter. So it's saying that with these two 36 volt panels at 250 watts, in a day which is producing 2 hours of good sunlight, you produce 500 watts multiplied by 2, so that's 1000 watts. So two 250 watt panels in 2 hours will create 1000 watt hours, or 1008 watt hours. 1008 watt hours in a day is more than the 930 watt hours that you need, and of course that includes all the losses. So as a rough guide, that should do. Now, charge controller efficiency. Obviously, when you've got the energy from the panels, you need it to the charge controller, which charges the batteries. You can put your charge controller efficiency in here. Typically, it would be 90% or something like that. Again, if you buy a good quality one, probably higher. If you buy a less quality one, probably lower. The amperage and the bank amperage I'll go back to later. So now we know the load-in. Because we know the load-in and the loss, or the approximate loss, you can, and we've got the panels, we can work on the batteries. So the bank voltage, so we need to know the bank voltage. This can get complicated here. If we put in 12 volts, if you put in 12 volts, it should work these things out now. So a 12 volt battery bank system would mean that your charge controller amperage would need to be 42 amps. The bigger the amount of amps, the more expensive your units are going to be. So now we know the bank voltage. It can work out the amperage of these things. So an inverter, if you had 1000 watt inverter, it's recommended here 1500. But if you had a 1000 watt inverter, 1000 volts, 1000 watts at 12 volts would be 83 amps, which is a bit insane, really. It's a bit much. So that suggests to me that you could do with upping. By the way, this figure here, the 83 volts, that directly relates to the size of components and wires and things, and it's a bit much. 83 amps is a bit much. Your wires would have to be very thick. So go back to the bank voltage and we'll change that. We'll step it up to 24. So all the amperage now will half. So now a charge controller amperage is 21 amps, which will be a lot cheaper. The unit will be cheaper because the components inside won't need to be as thick and the cable won't need to be as thick, so it saves us money. Well, hypothetically, no. In reality, you don't really know. It's all due to supply and demand, and maybe the thinner ones may be in more demand at the time and less supply, so maybe the price gets inflated. I don't know, but theoretically, it should be cheaper. You can see that the inverter draw amperage has also been halved to 40 amps, which is a bit more reasonable. So that's looking better. You could actually up that again to 48 volts, but if each time you multiply this voltage, you've got to have twice as many batteries to link together to make that work. So you save on the other components, but you have to double up on batteries, 12 volt batteries. So you have to sort of trade it off. For me, I use 24 volts because it seems to be the best value. So we'll keep that at 24 volts. Now let's go back here and have a quick look. Okay. Bank amperage, that's because we haven't filled that in yet. Loading. Yeah, bank draw amperage, we haven't got to that yet. Right, so next thing. Okay. Let's say, right, 24 volts. So bank 1. Oops. Now, a bank in this setup is going to consist of 2 batteries. So we're going to have 2 batteries here. Now, when you add 2 batteries in series, it adds to the voltage, but it doesn't add to the amp hour rating. So 2 12 volt batteries in series makes it 24 volts, which is correct because we need it to be 24 volts. But the amp hour will stay the same. So a typical battery is probably about 75 amp hour. We'll say 70. So we've got 2 batteries there, 70 amp hour. So you can see here that we've got a total capacity 70 amp hour, total banks 1. So in other words, it's 2 batteries joined together, 70 amp hours. And that's good enough for now. That's probably not going to be enough, but we'll see. So days storage required. How many days do you want to store the energy for in case there's no sun? Generally speaking, you do get around about 2 hours a day. There's not really any days where you wouldn't really get that I've seen, but I'm new to it. But anyway, let's say the storage required. You need to store enough energy for one day, and then you assume the next day you'll get more energy from the sun. So we'll say 1. Okay. Now, the amount of watt hours you need to be able to store is 930 watt hours. Now, when you come to buy batteries, they don't do it in watt hours, they do it in amp hours. So this already does the calculation for you. So the amount of energy required in amp hours is 40 amp hours. So to store all the energy we need for one day, you will need a 39 amp hour battery, or 2 of them actually, because you've got a bank voltage of 24. So that's good. So you've got capacity there, 70 amp hour. So it's two fairly normal batteries. Let's say an energy required here, 40 amp hour. Now the problem is with this is that's assuming that you're going to discharge the battery 100%, which you should never ever do. That's where this comes in. So the maximum discharge rate that you need to discharge the battery. Really, they say don't go more than 50%, but for me I'd go less than that, because at 50% discharging the battery, you could do some damage to it, and it's not going to last as long. So let's say 20% discharge. So to be able to discharge a battery by 20%, and and store all that energy, it's saying here that you need a capacity of 194 amp hours, which you haven't got. You've got 70, so it tells you here you need more. So I'll add another bank of 70 again. We've now got total capacity of 140. We need this, so we need another bank. And basically, this spreadsheet helps you to know how many banks you're going to need. So now we've got a capacity of 210 amp hour. So let's just quickly double check this. So 210 amp hours. There's a couple of different ways of doing this, but divide by 100, multiply by 80, 168. Oh, right, okay, 168, 19, oh no. Yeah, which is about right. I've just done that in the most long-winded way possible, but there we go. So it's right. So if you got this bank here, this 210 bank, discharged at 20% to be able to save battery life, it would work, and you would get about 40 amp hours of use. So now we've got the battery bank in place as well, because we know how much we're supposed to be getting. We can look at this. So the bank amperage is 7 amps. What that means is that the wires linking the battery banks together, wires linking the battery banks to a connector block or whatever connects all the batteries together. In this case, we've got 3 banks. The wires that go from each bank to the thing that it connects them would need to be 7 amps. 7 amps. The wires should be able to hold 7 amps. And then from obviously the battery bank manifold or connector block or whatever you want to call it to the charge controller needs to be 21 amps. So it needs to be thicker cable. And here it's saying that the wires that connect the battery banks to the manifold or connector block or whatever needs to be 14 amps, and from the connector blocks, the battery connector blocks to the actual inverter need to be 40 amps or 41 amps. Right, now I'll explain this now. So we filled in everything we need to fill in. Now we'll go to this wiring guide, and this helps us somewhat. Now those wire measurements I was telling you about just then, this is a better way of explaining it, because it's not that easy. You know, for example, I said, what was it? I said here the bank amperage, which connects the batteries to the connector block, it says 7 amps. Well, that's not correct, because here it says 14 amps, because the inverter will pull more amperage from it than the charge controller does. In other words, it's possible to draw more energy than what you actually put into the batteries. So it's important to look at this wiring guide. Now, the solar cable, it's saying the solar cable needs to hold 7 amps. The charge controller needs to hold charge controller cable, needs to hold 21 amps, and that's from the charge controller to the battery bank. The inverter to the battery bank needs to hold 41 amps, and the actual battery bank to the battery box, or the connector block, or whatever you want to call it, needs to be 14 amps. So now this bit's quite rough, but that's generally the size of the thickness of the cable that you'll need. So it helps to work those out for you. I mean, in practice, it's better to get thicker ones than what this says, but it's, you know, it's there to save some money. Excuse me. So there you go. So this is the spreadsheet. That's how to use it, and hopefully it will give people some idea of what's involved, and it will help to show you what sort of amperage you need and how many of things you're going to need, and so on. So I'll leave a link in the video and you can download it, and if you have any questions, just ask. Thanks for watching. Bye.